My name is Harold Yu. I'm a partner at Oric. We're a global law firm. I represent many companies. I represent a lot of mobile companies, and the mobile companies I represent are some of the most fun I work with. And the reason creates a lot of interest for me personally is because it is one area where it seems like the developments and hopefully the things that we talk about here today really do touch us immediately and make an amazing impact on a lot of people. So a really fun space to be involved in. I thought what we would do is introduce the panel and then maybe start with a few kind of high-level topics and maybe take it from the angle of looking at the mobile industry today from the perspective of the various constituents. I think the goal here is to be very interactive. I hope that all of you are willing to participate in that. So if you have questions, please let us know. So why don't we just begin by having each of the panelists introduce themselves briefly, maybe just tell us who you are, what you're doing, and maybe some quick kind of introductory thoughts on the mobile world. So Cyriac, why don't you start?
Okay, hi. Very nice to be here. I'm here because I love mobile and I like building mobile companies. This is my third one right now that I'm attempting to build. It's called Shopkick, and it's a company that was started with Kleiner Perkins' iFund, which works together with Apple and Reid Hoffman as investors. And we're trying to bridge the mobile and the physical retail world, because from our perspective, that's really where one of the biggest opportunities lies ahead. So that's me. Nice to be here.
Thanks, Cyriac.
My name is Bob Tinker. I run a company called Mobile Iron. We're funded by Sequoia, Norwest, and Storm Ventures. We actually work on something that's relatively boring in the mobile industry, but actually a gigantic opportunity, and that's actually the enterprise. For a little context, there's 50 million smartphones being shipped into the enterprise this year, and the enterprise is really struggling. It's relatively underinvested from a startup perspective. It's not very sexy, but I got to tell you, it's a big problem, and customers are willing to pay us money for it, so that's what makes it interesting. Yeah, and I think the comment on the general structure of the mobile industry is that fundamentally power is being redistributed really quickly. The pace of change is breathtaking. If you think back to what the mobile industry looked like even a year ago, it already looks different. And that just makes this really fun.
My name's Steve Hoffman, and I've been in the mobile industry a while, so I've seen this change happen at a very fast pace, like you were saying. I ran the mobile games group at InfoSpace. I actually worked with Cyriac back in the day. And I started a mobile venture-funded mobile startup called Xanol, which is out there doing well. And now I'm doing another startup. I'm actually doing a couple things. We have a new product that's about to launch, and its focus is helping developers solve their biggest problem out there right now. And for every mobile startup and developer, it's really, how do I get new users? How do I get users to download and use my application, on the iPhone, the Android, and other platforms? So we're working on solving that one fundamental problem. And then I'm also working with Qualcomm on a really neat project that I can't talk about yet. So
What is that?
I'm not allowed to.
Great. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, so my name's Lee Linden, and last year at this time I was actually an MBA student here at the GSB, and during my second year I started with my co-founder of Tapjoy just building mobile applications for iPhone and for Android, and we quickly learned that there's a set of challenges associated with building a business out of a mobile application. And we decided to start Tapjoy to provide services to publishers to help them build a business. So today we help with mobile advertising, and we provide services to make it very easy to sell virtual goods, host a virtual currency, and in general profit from a mobile app.
Great. Well, I thought maybe we would start more broadly, and Bob, I think you have a unique view into the industry in general, in the sense, looking at it from the perspective of what platforms are there and popular, and kind of what trends we see in that space. Is it Apple and Android and everybody else? Is it? I mean, where do you think this is headed right now?
Oh man, every mobile conference I go to, that's the first question. And the honest answer is nobody really knows. You know, what you can bet on is chaos and fragmentation. You can just bet on it. I think there's going to be an interesting battle between sort of the more open horizontal type platforms and then the sort of more closed like Apple and RIM versus sort of the open like the horizontal ones like Windows Mobile and Android. And frankly, both have their values. I think some people will choose one, some people will choose another. I actually don't think any one of them is really going to win. I think it's just going to be a big mess. So whatever strategy you have, you ought to count on it being a mess. Frankly, I personally like that. My company thrives on the chaos. The more chaos there is in the mobile industry, the more money we make. But yeah, it's they will all have their place. And frankly, the level of innovation, competition, and change that's happening, I think it's just going to be a mess, and that's a good thing.
Well, I think you know the market is kind of you know very obviously slanted right now toward Apple, and I think you know obviously a lot of folks are developing to that platform. Syriac, you guys just created a very interesting application. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and some of the behavior that you're seeing.
Yeah, we launched an application that actually makes you feel good, and we thought that could be a universal purpose. And while it makes you feel good, it actually changes the world, which we thought might be even better. So it's called Cause World, like a good cause, C-A-U-S-E, and world. So what it does is basically, it's the first app that lets you do good deeds simply for walking into a store. And the way it works is you download a free app on your iPhone or your Android phone, and then you come close to a store and you check in and you say, I'm here. And then you earn karma points. So you're actually increasing your karma just by going shopping. So we're turning shopping into guilt-free experiences. And then you are earning your karmas, and the interesting thing is what happens after that. Because we're turning the karmas into real world, real money contributions to charities. You choose one of your favorite charities on the service. There's currently 12 different causes. You can plant a tree in the rainforest. You can feed a family in America. You can help somebody in Haiti. You can help fight cancer. And behind it are all charitable organizations that you may know, like American Red Cross and Feeding America and Lance Armstrong's Live Strong organization. Mm-hmm. And the wonderful thing is that the money that is actually fueling the charity is not coming from you. It comes from big companies that have the money. So the initial donors are Citibank and Kraft Foods. They put $500,000 in to get it started. And every time you check in, you get 5 karmas. The 5 karmas turn into a real money contribution on the back end. And I think so far we have helped offset 800,000 pounds of carbon footprint, planted more than 50,000, helped plant more than 50,000 trees, and fed, I think, 60,000 families in the US, and gave 30,000 people in Sudan fresh water for an entire month, and saved 50,000 animals injured animals from pretty much certain death. So it's actually a kind of a wonderful experience for me personally, because I've always dreamed of the idea of actually using technology to change the world. And this was just supposed for us to be a trial application, because we are on the intersection of mobile meets retail. And we were actually just curious, what you said, what are consumers really willing to do with their cell phone when they're out shopping, and what are they not willing to do? So we created an application that needed absolutely zero retailer integration, which is CauseWorld. And the way it works is that big brands are spending the money on it, and they're getting an enormous marketing benefit because the CPM rate is less than $8 on it, and you get personal engagements with consumers. Actually, the average Facebook person has 130 friends, so you can do the math, what happens if you take 5 karmas and get 131 people, the person on the cell phone, and 130 people on Facebook, if they post it to their feed. So it's a very interesting platform, and what I find most exciting about it is the fact that it actually, if you think about it like this, like you put marketing money in here, and charity money comes out on the other side of the app. It's the first platform that turns regular marketing dollars directly into charity donations, 100%, which is kind of cool. And what did we learn about consumers? It's quite interesting, actually, to observe what consumers want to do with their phone. For example, we launched a badge. You can earn badges for doing certain things. It's like a little bit of like a game. It's kind of fun. And so on Valentine's Day, we said, so spread the love. It's Love Day, right? And make sure that you donate today, and we give you a special badge for that. And people just went nuts about it. So it's little things that matter to people, and it's actually quite encouraging also to see what people really care about. It is not necessarily all about money and selfishness. People are actually willing to do a lot to change the world, and that's it's pretty cool to see.
Hey, Cyriac, have the donors been able to measure, very analytically or quantitatively, kind of the benefit that they're seeing from this, from being associated with this?
Yes, they have, and they actually demand that. Mm-hmm. They demand weekly reports and look at every single result, of course. Initially, for them, it was kind of a trial thing, and test it a little bit and see what happens. And we were very grateful that they would even do that. And now it turns out it's actually a great marketing opportunity for them because of this deep engagement. Just put yourself for a second, take yourself out of the shoes of what you're currently doing and put yourself in the shoes of being a Citibank person. And there's all this discussion about city and financial industry and all that. So now you're bringing in Cosworld, and you're coming close to a store, and you're earning comma, and it says made possible by Citi. And then you spend them, and you actually give somebody fresh water in Sudan for an entire month, and it says made possible by Citi. And then you tell your friends about it on Facebook, and it says made possible by Citibank, that you just helped somebody in Sudan for an entire month with fresh water. That is a personal engagement level and an endorsement coming from you to your friends that is so valuable. From a brand perspective, it's so good to be associated with these positive things going on. That's why it's actually worth more. I would pose the simple question: if you were a marketeer, would you rather like to spend your money on a billboard, or on reading 131 people on average with deep personal engagement around changing the world and giving somebody fresh water in Sudan, and while you're doing that, people are actually in a shopping mode because they're getting close to stores. They may even use your Citibank credit card while they're shopping. Mm-hmm. And you are using your entire money that you otherwise would have spent on the billboard for fresh water in Africa. What would you rather do? And I think that is kind of the next generation of marketing that we need to think about. And mobile is the tool to personalize it. And that's why mobile is so exciting, because you can do something completely different that is more location-based, more personalized, and that's a very special thing. This is not the next small PC or the next small television set. This is a completely new medium of its own right.
Thanks, Cyriac. That's a very interesting model. Lee, I think you've got a very unique perspective into developers and publishers and what they need today and what they are trying to do. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing and their efforts to monetize their applications.
Sure. So we work with almost 1,000 publishers on iPhone and actually on Android now too. And first and foremost, we're seeing a lot of excitement. So we love working with these folks, and every day people are coming up with new exciting ways to take advantage of smartphone devices and these new platforms. But there are real challenges to building a business, and if you look at just the size of the number of publishers, the number of applications, for example, on the iPhone, a couple 100,000 at this point, and you look at how many are actually building a business there and can maintain profitability or generate revenue, it's a much smaller number. So when we work with publishers, we really like to have them think about kind of take a holistic view to what they're doing. So if it's If it's just a hobbyist and they're building an application, that's great. If you want to build a business and generate revenue, you're going to have to think about the various sources of revenue. And we kind of break it out into really 4 categories. One is just pay per download. This is basically where we saw, for example, the App Store and the iPhone and even the Android later working with. It turns out very few companies right now are able to build a profitable business on the pay per download model. So it feels enticing. It feels like, wow, I can kind of put out some content and have a small payment brought back to me. But the number of users who are willing to pay per download is something between 1/10 to 1/20th the number of users that are willing to just download a free application. So that's a big barrier. So if it's one thing to try that, but we often recommend people take that holistic hybrid approach. So then there are advertisements, and there's traditional banner ads, and that's something that there's a lot of excitement about. But what we're seeing in the marketplace, right at the intersection, helping publishers with advertisements, is that right now there's actually a much faster growth rate of the inventory, the number of eyeballs on these devices, and the duration these eyeballs are looking at the devices, than there is the growth rate of the good, high-paying ads. So that creates, if you will, more supply of ad space than there is demand right now for that ad space. And actually the supply is growing faster than the demand, which means that ad rates in general are actually going down. And so that's a interesting thing to consider, and I have some other thoughts on that we can talk about later perhaps. But so that on the ad space, it's important to optimize your ads and figure out potentially using multiple ad networks, figuring out what kinds of ads will be more engaging for your users. The third way we help publishers, and we recommend that publishers think about monetization and how to build a business here, is with alternative types of revenue. So virtual goods and virtual currency are a really strong trend right now on mobile. And again, you take advantage of the users that come in for free to try your product, and you almost upsell them once they've had a chance to look at it with a virtual good. It might be unlocking some new functionality, or it might be a new level pack in a game, or it might be some other piece that you want them to be able to purchase. Or you might have some sort of virtual currency, some virtual currency system, kind of like Syriac's Cause World, where you can earn karma points. And what you're doing is you're just encouraging users to interact more with your application, and through that process, you're going to generate value. Either it's for yourself as a publisher, or in Syriac's case, for the good of humanity. So, that's the third way. And the fourth way that we're excited about mobile sort of platform monetization is brand new types of sort of marketing action. That's what we call it. And we think that the mobile device will be able to pull people into commerce situations and transact perhaps in the real world or even on their phone. And if you can sort of facilitate that with a mobile application, bring someone into the store to make a purchase, or have somebody even download another application, or any of these sort of call to marketing action activities, that's a great way. So, net, it's hard to build a good business on mobile right now, is what we're finding. We work with hundreds of publishers who struggle with it, but there are a lot of avenues that are evolving and creating opportunity. And my advice to publishers is to really look at all of them and try to find as many of those ways to engage with your user and create value that's possible.
Thanks, Lee. Hey, maybe we could spend another second on advertising. I mean, obviously that's kind of a big topic, but are we seeing anything, let's say the last 6 to 9 months, that kind of leads us to think that things are changing for advertising in general in the mobile world, that in terms of getting better to developers and publishers? And secondly, you talked about kind of optimizing for ads as one way to kind of as a benefit, but can you maybe talk a little bit about the multiple networks and kind of specifically what that yields?
Yeah, so we had a crazy 6 months. So we've seen 2 major acquisitions that were extremely high multiples of gross revenue, much less net revenue. And and those are signals in the marketplace. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of energy around this ecosystem of putting ads on these mobile devices where all these eyeballs are looking. So I think certainly the last 6 months have been, I don't know, I mean, I'm new to the industry, to be honest. So, I've been in the industry for a year. Last 6 months were an acceleration of the previous 6 months. So that's my set of data points. Looking historically, just the volume, you can look back the last 10 years and, it is on a very steady growth curve in terms of the inventory, the eyeballs. I think what's slower moving are the advertisers. And so there's a need for better ad formats that match mobile, because taking just normal ads from the web and putting them on mobile doesn't always have the same effect. So that's one thing. We are seeing some innovation though. So video ads are actually starting to be come into use on mobile devices with 3G networks. Those are exciting. We're seeing more location-based ad interest, but not nearly enough real innovation and real delivery of that inventory. So that's kind of the last 6 months. In terms of the ad networks and optimization, we have a unique position where we work with 12 ad networks, and we get to see what's coming through their pipeline. And then on the other side, we work with publishers, and we try to sit in the middle and optimize, if you will, as a mediation platform. That's one of Tapjoy's services. And there's less differentiation than you would want in a very competitive marketplace. That's kind of one very high-level bit. Two, I'll say that the ads are really broken up into two categories: performance ads and sort of brand ads. And so brand ads are folks who want folks like Land Rover and Nike and Dell who buy based on impression, and they have a different set of metrics, and they're trying to get sort of awareness out there. Performance ads are folks like other publishers who want new users, and they're counting every click and measuring every new conversion, and they're much more analytical. And so right now we're seeing that there's a huge differentiation between those two segments of advertisers and what they're paying, and effectively they're both getting the same end product, which is a user eyeball looking at the same ad format and taking some sort of action. So this is not completely unique to mobile. There's always a differentiation between brand advertising and performance advertising. In mobile, though, it's particularly noticeable since the ads themselves are so similar. So there's going to have to be some rationalization of that, and today, if you look at the ad networks and sort of seeing what they're doing, some ad networks are focusing on the brand ads, but at the end of the day, like, most of them are really all vying for the same big brand advertisers right now, and you can see it in their pipeline of ads. It's just not that differentiated. So that's
great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah.
So, Steve, I've got my advertising strategy all worked out, and now I need users. And I think you had talked about user acquisition as obviously a key. What are your thoughts there, and what can we advise the audience on that topic?
Yeah, I think it's increasingly hard for a new developer who puts a lot of time and effort into one app when they put it out there to get users. Because when the iPhone launched, if you put out your app, it could be virtually anything, and you would have a lot of downloads because there wasn't that many choices. Now the choices, it's so huge. It's getting to be like the web. So how do people discover what I'm doing? How can I get one user and translate that into thousands of users? So those type of problems are the ones we have to figure out now. And I think on the web we've seen a lot of different mechanisms coming into play where you can get users and kind of grow your user base. And on mobile, we're just starting to play with that. So I know for a fact that some of my partners in this project, there are 4 of us, there's 6 of us who got together from 4 different companies, and we actually my partners have been developing apps and putting them out there in the App Store, and then measuring what they can do in the App Store to actually get more users to come in and download their products, and how they would translate one user that they got into many more users through connecting their different applications together. So what we've done, it's a product called AppZing, and it hasn't launched yet, but the idea is we took that knowledge and built out a platform so that it would make it easier for other developers to do the same thing, to kind of grow their user base and manage that. The other thing on the advertising I think is very interesting to point out is I actually think there's going to continue to be a huge surplus of ad inventory out there. So really the way you're going to make money in mobile will continue to be just selling your app or selling a premium version of your app, or else through virtual goods, which you're working on. I think virtual goods are going to be, just like we've seen in the Facebook space, you're going to give away a free app, and then you're going to get people hooked, and you're going to upsell them on little pieces. And then there's one other area actually in advertising that I think is really going to, where you can really command a premium, because I see the CPMs coming down and down, and the cost per click, it's still going to be, there's just so much inventory out there. But the one area where inventory won't matter is if you make a very specific app for a specific audience that is highly valued by a certain group. So for example, if you make an app for doctors, has a lot of utility and you can market it directly to all the doctors, the drug companies will pay you a lot of money to get to those doctors, to be on that screen. And that is independent of the huge inventory. It doesn't matter. If you have 50,000 doctors using your app, and that's just one example, or pharmacists or other people, and then you have a certain group that wants to reach them, then you can make it independent of these ad networks. You can go directly to the brands that want to reach those people and command high CPMs.
Harold, do you mind actually?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
This is a structural question that if I was out there, I'd be interested in answering, and I'm actually curious about this. So if you rewind 24 months ago, this whole concept of an app on mobile was sort of archaic, right? Everybody was sort of presuming everything would go into the browser, right? And if you sort of look at, everybody talks about apps now, and apps doing this and apps doing that. And it's actually kind of a surprise if you sort of think about where the mobile industry was 24 months ago, that now everybody's talking about native apps versus everything being absorbed into the browser. So if you think, there's two questions. One is, as the mobile browsers improve rapidly with things like HTML5, what's the implication of that? And then the second one, what does that mean for all these app vendors? What do they become in a world where the browser suddenly gets a lot better?
Well, I see there's not a clear line between apps and mobile web content, because with all the developers I'm talking to, what they're doing is a lot of them are building mobile web applications, and then they're wrapping them very quickly in an app and putting them into the App Store, and then they'll also have a mobile web version. So it's really just a way of, the App Store is in kind of a way of marketing it.
It's sort of a hot link to it.
Yeah, through iTunes. And if you're smart, then you have one code base. You can do a lot with mobile web right now, and it will get even better. So in the future, I see people I see them kind of merging together. And it's really, the best thing about the app is iTunes itself, or the App Store.
So what does that do to the sort of monetization model? If they stop from being apps to being just another web page out in the cloud?
Yeah, it becomes much harder to sell them.
Okay, that's what I thought. You have input, the sort of observation of that, given that you're sort of selling to these guys?
Yeah, so I think in the short run, apps are still will be very interesting because of the responsiveness, the kind of focused task that is involved with that. The small screen really means that discovery of new applications is actually hard, and so the App Store really is the marketing channel, and it's easy to find and execute and interact with apps. There are also richer experiences today, and I actually believe that will be the case for a while. HTML5 is cool and great. We need better networks, actually, more so than the standards of the browsers. We need better latency, and we need, so there's some issues there on the devices and the wireless networks. I think in general, though, you want to build an app that is connected, and the line does get kind of blurred, and I agree with Stephen on that. So,
sure, thanks.
No, absolutely. Thanks, guys. One thing that I've been wondering is, obviously there's some great topics we've talked about in terms of services with mobile services that are out there right now. At the Mobile World Congress, I think Eric Schmidt demonstrated in his keynote some of the services that Google's going to be providing. such as voice recognition and so forth over mobile devices, which is all amazing and very cool. Yeah, are there other areas or services that we collectively should be thinking about out there? Kind of where are we headed on that? What's new and interesting around the corner? I mean, we've talked about location based. What else is there that we should be thinking about in the next 6 to 12 months? And anyone?
I would say a couple of the areas that are really interesting are some of the areas that have been not looked at as much. And there's good reason why they haven't been looked at it yet, but it may actually be just around the corner, which is what you asked. So one is mobile healthcare. It's a very interesting area. Just think of diabetes patients uploading their sugar levels at all times with an implant, being connected to doctors, emergency services, communities, self-help groups. There's 25 million people in the US that have diabetes. That's just one disease.
That's a really good one. Hippocrates is crushing it. There's a bunch of healthcare companies that are investing tons of money in that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunity. The question is it a startup opportunity or not? But that's a different question. The second one is probably augmented reality. But it's basically just a continuation of what's already happening with physical world meets mobile. I think that the intersection of mobile and the physical world is really where the biggest opportunity lies. That's also why we're working on mobile meets retail. And then maybe another opportunity is to think about what could consumers actually do if their cell phones interacted without them knowing about it every time. So they give permission once, but then they all connect and help each other. You probably remember that I found it a brilliant model. There's always model and execution. That's two different things. But the model, I believe, was brilliant of Dash, where you would drive down the street and it would automatically upload. It's a navigation system in your car. It's not a cell phone, but it's connected to a wireless network. And so you're driving down the 280, and what do you think is the reason when somebody goes 35 miles an hour on the 280? So let's assume there's two people who both go 35 miles an hour in the same spot. So it's unlikely they're both drunk. So therefore, it's probably a traffic jam. And everybody else gets informed automatically, and the navigation is automatically rerouted for everybody else who's using the same network. So simply by being selfish, and that's why it's so brilliant, just by being selfish and wanting to be navigated, you're automatically helping everybody else who also wants to be navigated. And if you take that concept and you scale it to other areas, that's a really interesting thing, I believe. So I think we're just I believe we're in the stone age of mobile. And if you think 3 years ago, you pointed this out a little bit, just last 6 months, or Lee said 6 months ago, everything looked different. Great companies like Lee's didn't exist a year ago. And today we're working with them. So another example is 3 years ago, the two biggest consumer-facing giants in Silicon Valley were not even really in mobile. They're called Apple and Google. There was no iPhone 3 years ago. And 2 years ago, there was no SDK. And you pointed it out. There were no apps because everybody said it's mobile web. At the end of the day, the consumer simply does one little thing. Consumer always goes where the best value is. And that's exactly how it should be. So when we discuss mobile web versus downloadable apps, the answer is very simple. Whatever the best experience is will win. And if it's simpler to start a mobile web browser and faster, and it's a great experience, the mobile web will win. And by the way, likely over time, that will be the case. Right now, why are mobile apps so cool? Because they're so way better from a consumer experience perspective than anything else that's out there. And why does the iPhone win? Because it's so way better than the BlackBerry right now. And so whatever the consumer experience is, wherever the leapfrogging happens, the consumer will go. And the good news is that's exactly how it should be, because the consumer is always right. So in a nutshell, if you think ahead, what will the landscape look like in 2 to 3 years from now in mobile? If iPhones didn't exist 3 years ago, so what will it be there in 3 years from today? Will it be iPhone 5.0, or will there be a company we haven't even heard about? And I'm sorry to use Lee as a guinea pig, but his company didn't exist a year ago. By the way, mine neither. So that means that there will be new companies coming on the scene. And there's one big topic that hasn't been cracked, and whoever is going to crack it is going to go into a gold mine, which is mobile virality. You know that everything online is about virality, right? And whoever became big, just think for a moment. Who is viral? eBay, Facebook, MySpace, Twitter. It's all viral stuff. So if somebody can crack virality on mobile, which is a much bigger problem than online, you will see a very interesting opportunity. And the reason it's so difficult is because of fragmented devices. And Bob pointed out earlier, it's a big mess, and he loves it. But from a virality point of view, that is not very great. So because you never know which cell phone your friend has. So therefore, it's not very easy to just pass something on to them, except if you want a text message, and that's not the media richest experience the world has seen so far. So that means there's a huge opportunity here in virality, and if that can be cracked in the next few years, it will be very exciting. And we're seeing some of those things, like if there is some form of virality going on, it's actually becoming really interesting. We haven't really announced this publicly very much, so this is the first time I'm saying this in front of a group that I don't know personally. But our service has reached the number of users and the number of usage, the amount of usage that Foursquare needed 10 months for. We did that in 2 months. So we just haven't talked about it. So in other words, there's significant opportunities once you get this dynamic going a little bit. And I'm not saying we've cracked it, but if you get a little closer, there's huge opportunity.
And I would build.
Yeah, please.
I would build on. The area I think that's really interesting is like you were saying, Sirak, mobile tied to the physical world, and in particular, I'm really interested in the idea of intention tied to proximity. So if I would, the phones, if you kind of imagine what are the phones of the future going to be doing for you, well, they will kind of know what you want, what your intention is, and the things that you want, and they will match that with your location and your proximity to other people and services in your area. So, for example, if you're at a conference, let's say here today, and there are certain people that I want to connect with, that type of person, and I can let my device know that I want to meet those people, then it can let those other people at the conference know that, oh, I have this and you have that, and put us together. And those could be people that I have a relationship with that I know. So, oh, I didn't know you were at this conference. It's great. We can meet up and talk. Or it can be other people who I want to do business with but haven't met yet, and they're doing a certain thing that matches with mine. And then if you take that outside of just a conference, but you apply it to the real world where you're going, looking for products and services, and you're walking through the world, and your mobile device can say it's a certain time of day, I know it's a certain hour, so you're in your work mode, and you want to accomplish this. Well, these are the things that you'll be interested in, and it brings them to you. That is going to be an exploding area across these smartphone devices that you can't do with your laptop or PC or anything else.
Yeah. Lee, Bob, any thoughts on those? Or?
I agree with those topics. I also think that there are a couple other interesting ones. One is services that just help you navigate your life, and there potentially is room for a similar to the productivity suite being kind of the killer app for desktop, something that is related to your management of your life, but on your mobile device. And the fact that it's with you at all times and can have contextual information or information about your history, that realm gets exciting to me. In addition, I'm interested in things that help everyday transactions and inefficiencies go away because everyone has a computer in their pocket. So if you're standing in line somewhere, if that can be avoided, if you are trying to, if you're with a business in the real world and you can provide the forms filled out without, doing paper. So the stuff that kind of the exchanges of information that happen every couple hours all throughout the day, using the computer in our pocket to make that like incredibly more efficient and interesting is something that I'm interested in too.
Yeah, I think there's another thing that's probably useful to think of in mobile. If you sort of get outside the perspective of a bunch of 30 to 40-year-olds in Silicon Valley and New York, I think it's sort of important to apply that lens to mobile. Because mobile fundamentally is one of the few truly global technology phenomena since the internet and the browser. And the reality is there are huge, giant industries and lots of people that don't behave like we do. And I think it's important to sort of remember that in terms of thinking about unaddressed markets. I think the point about healthcare being transformed by mobile, there are things like that there. I think that's an interesting business opportunity there, is to look at big markets of old people and how is mobile going to affect them? Or markets in Europe where people use mobile differently, or go to Asia and be thinking about it. I'll give you an example. You know why smartphones aren't really catching on in Korea with QWERTY keyboards? Because the Korean language actually works really well on a little 9-pad key, right? So there's really subtle things like that on a global basis that it's important to sort of remember everybody's not like us. And I think in doing that and sort of thinking about the opportunities in mobile, I'm not even sure what they all are because I still look at through the lens of a 30 to 40-year-old Silicon Valley guy. But I think for those of you that come from other places or are interested in other markets, I think one of the really big opportunities is to take a step back and think about how is mobile going to transform healthcare? How is mobile going to transform things like manufacturing? How is it going to transfer things like retirement? Whatever it is. So frankly, I don't have any really good ideas there, but one of the good strategies in sort of entrepreneurship is to go where people aren't, and look for the places where people aren't necessarily piling in.
Yeah, Bob, great point. I think there's one set of people that we really haven't addressed in this whole equation yet, and I think they would probably not be happy about that. And those are the folks those are the folks that are responsible for the massive amounts of data that we're trading amongst ourselves. And what I'm wondering is, obviously there are new models now of how we're interacting with them. We're trying to detach phones from carriers, et cetera. But surely they must be up to something here. What's the panel's thoughts on how this is going to evolve? Obviously, we're asking for a lot of bandwidth for these services, but we don't want to necessarily have to pay a lot more for it. I mean, where's this all headed?
I think at the current rate, the cost per bit is actually too high. In the current, we faced that at CBS, for example. When we built CBS Mobile, we had a lot of video content because it's kind of the nature of the business. So when you want to transmit CSI over a cell phone, which is usually about a 46-minute edition, that's a problem because at the end of the 46 minutes, the carrier has probably lost about $10. So it's not a feasible model. But I don't think the answer is to say that we are now going to be charged on a per bit basis because that's not going to fly with consumers, and that means you're actually killing the market. The answer is we need better technologies that have lower cost per bit prices. And that is already being worked on, as you probably all know, with LTE. And LTE is really a game changer in many ways. I don't know if you guys have seen a demonstration of LTE. We're talking about speeds that are, not too far off from what you know from your office. And at that point, the cost per bit rate is becoming affordable. It's very interesting, by the way, when you think about other cultures, how some cultures may actually, you know how it is in some parts of Asia, is a lot of people have never had a regular telephone, but they jump directly to mobile, right? I experienced that last year. 2 years ago, I went through some crazy places like Bhutan and the Amazon jungle, and when I got there, they literally were, chatting away and texting away on their cell phones at 10,000 feet altitude, the monks at the monasteries in Bhutan, and they'd only had cell phones for 4 years, because before that, it just didn't exist. And they had previously been away from their families for months without ever talking to them. Now they were texting back and forth. But the interesting thing is that these guys jumped directly over the landline and over the PC to the cell phone. So now if you take this further and you think about what does that mean for the rest of the world, some parts of the world, like the Amazon jungle, for example, is still largely without a cell phone network simply because it doesn't make sense from an economic point of view to put up all these towers because there's not a lot of people there, right? So those areas may actually jump directly from 0 and to LTE, because the area is much wider that you can cover, and the economics are different. And in those areas today, they're using hollow trees to communicate. I'm not actually joking. They're tapping against the tree and have Morse codes to tell each other what's going on, because there's no other except a satellite phone maybe, but that's too expensive. It doesn't work very well in the jungle. So the opportunity comes along to get rid of this data issue as you improve the network quality, and that's really the biggest threat to the future of the industry, I believe, if we don't go fast enough there, because we can't keep going at the current rate. It's just not really affordable. And as much as we all like to bash carriers because it's so much fun, it's actually not very reasonable, because from an economic point of view, it simply is not affordable.
Any other thoughts, Bob? Anyone?
Well, I worked for a while, a long time with the carriers, and it was they had the ball in their hand. They could have, they had the app store, they had the direct connection to the consumer, they had the billing mechanisms, and Apple just stole the show because the carriers never figured it out. They never really supported or engaged the developer community. My fear, as a developer, is that Apple will, wind up becoming more and more like the carriers of the old day. And I think, there's been a big controversy. I don't know if you've been following it, but lately, the big controversy this past week with Apple was all the Babe applications that they put out there, and Apple just pulled them overnight. I mean, literally, there are literally, these applications are pretty tame. They're, swimsuits and bikinis, things like that. And Apple just decided, overnight we're going to pull all of these, and there are a lot of independent developers, tens of thousands, who are making money on these, and overnight they were just ripped down from the App Store, while they let the big brands stay. So Playboy and all these Maxim, and with exactly the same content, got to stay in the App Store. So if you look at that, that's a danger for both Apple, because I don't think they really thought through it very carefully, and it's also a danger for developers, many of whom, it's part of their livelihood, they're independent. So, but that's just emblematic of, what can happen. The beauty of what I see that Apple's done is they have like one device, and it's consistent, and you upload it to one app store, and it works, whereas the carriers, and you're actually seeing this problem with Google, the Android is all these different devices with different screen sizes and configurations, and then you have to start porting it to all these different devices. So there's this big trade-off, and I think the tension that we're going to see over the next year between these is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. That battle between control and fragmentation.
Yes, control and fragmentation. Yes.
Makes your head hurt.
Yes.
Good. Why don't we cover one other topic and then maybe take some questions, and that is where I think each of you has raised money from the VC world. Any advice for the audience as folks walk down that path in this field, raising money in this area? Any specifics on that, guys? Anyone?
Well, I raised money many times. I did 3 different venture-funded startups. I'm also currently helping 5 different very early stage entrepreneurs with their companies, advising them. And I can see the struggle, because it's gotten much harder to raise money in today's environment than it was a couple years ago. So a couple years ago, you could step in with a great idea and kind of a rough prototype, and you could get funded. Today, the venture capitalists, absolutely, they have to see your use. They want 2 things. The number one is revenue growth, but they will fund you without revenue growth if you have exceptional user growth. People are just using your website or your app like crazy. But without those, what they call traction, it's, you're almost wasting your time going out for funding. And in a way, the whole venture model isn't really working the way it was intended to, because there aren't a lot of big value exits over $100 million, just IPOs or acquisitions. They're more sub $100 million. And that model for the venture capitalists doesn't make sense. They need big exits. They are betting on a few blockbuster hits, like Facebook and Twitter style hits. They're not betting on a lot of $20 million acquisitions. That's a waste of their time. And they actually, they often lose money on those type of deals. So if you're an entrepreneur out there, though, and honestly, you should be looking at the $5 to $50 million acquisition range, because that's a lot of money, especially if you didn't take venture capital and have these big liquidation preferences. So what I'm telling the entrepreneurs out there is, don't even waste every entrepreneur now graduating from business school is like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get funded, it's going to happen, I'm going to get my millions of dollars, and we're going to be the next Twitter. But it's very rare. It probably won't happen, and even if it does, even if you do, it won't. And even if you do get the money, you may not end up getting much out of it by the time your company actually sells for $30 million, because you've taken in $30 million in financing and you don't get anything. So it's really, how do you build your model on getting revenue early, bootstrapping it, and hopefully exiting for even a few $1 million is great after a couple years. You're not going to get paid that. So I think that figuring that out right now is what entrepreneurs need to be doing.
Really well said, Steve. Any other thoughts on that? Or yeah,
I would probably add one thing. I would say I think there's two different models in the market, and both can make sense. So one is the model that you just described, that Steven's talking about, where you have an idea, and you know that on mobile there's a lot of small to medium-sized companies. There's a lot of two people in the garage businesses that, by the way, are doing very well for two people, but they're not scalable to a large company size. So it really depends on whether you want to go that route, or the other route is you try to develop an idea that has the potential. And of course, you never know. And as you said, it's like playing the lottery to start a company. I mean, let's face it, right? You can't do that for the money. You have to do it because you love it. But let's assume you love it. That doesn't mean you have the right thing for the second approach. The second approach is you have an idea that has the potential to become a very large company. The potential. And then when you have that idea, and by the way, I think there's not an infinite number of those ideas, especially not in mobile. I talked about device fragmentation earlier. You talked about the mess. That means that you need to find new approaches and find the right areas to go into. But there are such opportunities. If you believe you have an idea like that, then venture funding is probably very helpful, because it helps you scale much faster than otherwise you could. And some of those models also need, for example, entries to large partners. Hard to do if you are a one or two man band in Silicon Valley, right? And it's very helpful to get the support from the right people for that. It depends on your business idea. So now, then the next question is, what are your chances of actually getting the funding if, let's assume you love it and you have the great idea. Now the next question is, how do you get the money? And basically on that front, I think it's two things that an entrepreneur needs to do. One is you got to eliminate risk, and two, you got to build assets. Those are the two things an entrepreneur does every day. You got to eliminate risks, and you talked about consumer traction. That's one risk you could eliminate. Another one is you could have a partnership with a big player already lined up. There are certain ways you can try to eliminate risks. And for each business, that is a different set of risks. It's not always the same thing. It depends on what you want to do. And then how to build assets. Think about assets. What kind of assets could you create that very quickly give you an advantage in the market over other people? So if you tell your grandmother about what you have achieved in the last 6 months, what would be the biggest thing you could have done in 6 months? And how could you build this business from nothing? Essentially, that's the art of an entrepreneur, right? You create something out of hot air. That's really what you're doing. That's the job. And most people think that's daunting and crazy, and it is both. And then the question is, okay, are you up for it? Do you still want to do it? And if you want to do it, and you feel that's really right your thing to create something out of nothing, then you are probably an entrepreneur. And then you got to find out whether you can actually pull it off. And so the next big question for you is, are you a chicken and egg breaker? Because good entrepreneurs are chicken and egg breakers. You've probably heard that many times that, yeah, well, if you had some users, I would give you some advertising money. Well, if I had some partners, then I could get users. Well, okay, the big partner says, well, what do you have to offer me? Why should I work with you today? And the user says, what is on your service? Why I should use it? And there's no answer to either question because you're sitting there with hot air around you. So in other words, you got to find a way to break the chicken and egg problem, and that's what you have to do every day. So in other words, to sum it up again, you basically do two things. You eliminate risks, and you build assets. And the how-to is to break chicken and egg problems. And that's what you do every day. And one thing that maybe, I don't know if this is interesting to you, but I think that one of the main things I believe an entrepreneur needs to be willing to do as a person, as an individual, is to be laughed at. Because for a while, nobody will take you seriously, no matter what you do. When Lee started his business 1 year ago, he was a student. He was doing it in his dorm room. Some people found that really cool, but others didn't know much about it. You'll probably hear a lot more about him in the next few years. So that's the art of entrepreneurship. You do something although nobody else cares. And most people don't take it seriously, and for a long time, you're probably not going to get any traction. So if you think entrepreneurship is glamorous, think again. Because 90% of the time is hard work and just slugging it up the hill and creating something out of nothing. And the 10% are much better than what you ever get if you're an employee. I can promise you that too. So the highs are higher, the lows are lower. In other words, the variance is much larger. I believe it's absolutely worth every minute of it, but that's your choice.
Yeah, I actually I had a great experience with the venture capital industry, actually. So we raised $20 million a day. We'll probably raise another 10. It's actually been pretty straightforward for us. Actually, the first two guys who saw the deal, Sequoia and Norwest, funded it, both our Series A and Series B. So you might ask, why was that versus some of the common companies? If you can find something that's structural in the industry, those can become really big companies. Look for structural shifts, major new markets being created, stuff like that. If you want to play on the big games, like the VC guys will fund those all day long. And I've actually had great luck raising venture capital money. But I think you're right. There is sort of this bifurcation going on with there's sort of these micro startups and $20, $30 million exits, and then there's the bigger plays. And frankly, that's just sort of a decision for each of you as to sort of what do you want to do. The venture capital funding model has changed. That the PowerPoint presentation getting $20 million is a little unusual. My advice would be find somebody to fund you for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of seed money and build a prototype. If you have a prototype that you can show people to at least make the concept real, that will drastically change sort of your velocity inside the venture capital industry. Yeah, the model has changed, but don't give up on them. They actually have had a great experience.
Yeah. Lee.
So my motto is to pay people like Syriac to talk about me in public, and then I got lots of interest from
really our
investors.
main business model.
So what we did was exactly what Bob said, which was we took a little bit of money from someone that was very, very helpful, a guy named Dave Wharton, and we were able to just keep iterating until we basically became cash flow positive. And then that gives you leverage to keep working and build a lot of value, well, build as much value as you can, and not have to be under time pressure, which is a really good place to be when you're trying to raise money, is not that you need it, but that if you took it, look how much bigger the business could grow. So that's my bit of advice.
Yeah, no, great points, everyone. And let me just throw in my 2 cents, which is to your point about traction. Steve, there's no we see a lot of deal flow, and for the deals that we see that have quote unquote the traction, they're just getting multiple term sheets from top tier investors. For the ones that don't, nothing, and it's a pure binary formula right now. So why don't we open it up for questions from all of you? I think we've been doing a lot of talking. So yeah, sure.
You mentioned the big opportunity of mobile meets reality, which I totally agree, because now local-based advertising comes to the game. The question is, who is selling this to these advertisers? Because we are talking about the long tail. We are talking about small and medium-sized enterprises, which are not in the online marketing industry at all right now. So, what's the status quo you see?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the whole notion of mobile advertising for local is a whiteboard opportunity, meaning it looks great on the whiteboard, and then you go into reality after that. So that doesn't mean there is no models though, but it requires a. It's not this one is an example of where it's not about the business opportunity as a problem, like some other ideas maybe not have such a big market opportunity. It's about how to go to market. So there are some approaches that are very interesting in this field, how you could go to market. But so far there has been Yelp, of course, right? And Yelp is probably closest to it. But Yelp has some other issues, right now, with the local advertisers, as you probably might have followed, and there may be merit or not. Hopefully, there's not. But it's a big market with a lot of players involved, and you have to find an interesting go-to-market strategy. And so far, I have not seen the one that can really break that chicken and egg problem, because it's the classic example. What was that? So I would say My Town is actually a great example, because they have been able to build up a user base incredibly fast, very impressive. And I don't know exactly, they're an iFund company as well, but I don't know exactly what their focus is going forward, whether that's the market for them or not. That's their decision. I'm just not sure whether it is what they want to do. With regards to Foursquare, I think it's a very interesting development. The question that I would pose is how scalable it is in terms of the user base, how many people want to participate, because there's always a little bit of a difference between PR and reality. In some cases, it's larger than in others, and it's important to check that, because if you want to build something that really attracts a lot of stores, think about the mom and pop shop in Kentucky. That store is only going to join if there is thousands of users in that town that are participating. It doesn't matter to that store whether you have 300 or 500,000 users in the United States. It doesn't matter. It's only relevant how many users you have in that city. And so that remains to be seen, I would say. And I also don't know whether that's their model as well, because it seems to be more like a game. And I'm not sure what the model is. So we'll see, I guess. But both are very interesting examples, and I think it shows you the direction of where the potential opportunities are in that space.
Yeah, I've thought about that. And what you have to do, you can't have a sales force go out and contact every store in every city. I mean, it's just impossible. What you have to do is mobilize your users and incentivize them to become your sales force. So they have to walk into the shop and say, get this on here, and convince the shop owners to do that.
Yes.
Two quick questions. So iPhone was a revolution and generated new business models. And based on your discussions with vendors like Qualcomm, Apple, RIM, and others, what do you see the next revolution, and what business models will that enable? And second question, we talked a lot about developed market, and the mobile growth is in emerging markets like Asia and Africa. I don't see someone in Africa trading virtual goods. What other business model are there for emerging markets?
Did you want to?
I'm not really an expert in that. I just know that they're not like us, so it's important to sort of put that lens on. I've seen a bunch of folks spend time on, in particular, financial services in developing markets, because mobile payments. If you think about it, the combination of lack of infrastructure for communications is the same lack of infrastructure about access to capital and moving money around. So you're actually seeing some really interesting things happen there. Some of that's actually being handled by really big companies and banks. Some of that's actually smaller companies trying to figure out. But that's a big structural gap in some of the developing markets. I think the point Syriac had about some of these developing markets are going to leapfrog right to LTE and have much higher bandwidth. If you can sort of figure out which ones are likely to go first, it's a good place to go move and figure out what to do about it. What was the first part of the question?
The next revolution based on your discussions with mobile vendors.
This whole thing about figuring out how to master fragmentation feels like a huge opportunity. It's a nasty, thorny one, but the reason why Apple and the App Store has done so well is, to your point, they sort of controlled the experience and narrowed it to one device and said your app badge has to be 91 pixels by 91 pixels. I think it's 91 by 91, isn't it? Like, seriously, it's that specific. But the reality is mobile's going to be fragmented. So if you can figure out something that fundamentally cuts across all of those and can be horizontal across all of those, that increases your velocity, increases your market size. So I think there's going to be an interesting focus of companies trying to figure out how to do that. A good example is, like, we actually built an enterprise app store. Sounds kind of boring, right? What the hell is an app store for an enterprise? But if you think about it, the enterprises live in the reality of their users have all sorts of different platforms. It's not like an enterprise can say, hey, we're going to build an app for the iPhone, and everybody else is out of luck, right? So how do you actually create things that are horizontal across this fragmentation? Feels like a big opportunity.
There's interesting things happening when you go to other places that you might not have even thought about. And not all of those, by the way, are startup opportunities. I'm just sharing them because it shows you the range of things happening. So, for example, in South Africa, you turn on the TV and the first thing you see is a legal advice show. And there's lawyers on the screen.
Is that right?
Yeah, new business model. And they are giving you advice for your issues, and you text them in. So in other words, there is not even a telephone connection. You just text your issue in, and then the lawyers start talking about it. Maybe they even give you a phone call back and sell their advice by the hour. So that's one thing where mobile changes the game. Mobile banking, obviously really important, as you pointed out, because many people don't have bank accounts. It's their computer. They don't have a PC. This is the way to shift it around. That's more in the developing world. But if you think about the developed world, where are the big opportunities? The first part of your question. I think it all starts with what is the cell phone about and how is it drastically different from any other media platform. That's where it begins. What is the use case? Let me give you an example. So at CBS, for example, we had the issue that CBS is traditionally used to be a television company. So there is 2 or 3 hours of primetime TV. That's the job, right? Entertain people from 8 to 11 p.m., plus Letterman. So what do you do in the meantime? So today, what happens is you wake up in the morning. I personally don't have my hands available in the morning because I'm in the kitchen and I'm always late. So there is no time for me to hold anything. So the media that I can use are radio and television. And in most cases, the TV is a radio in the morning and nothing else because you don't really look at it, you just listen to it. Then you are in the car and use your cell phone or, of course, in the passenger seat. Then you are at work and you use your PC. And you lean forward and you want lots of options. You want to drill down and click on, you expect a lot of different menu items and all that. If that weren't there, you would say, what a crappy application. Then you go for lunch. And if you don't have a lunch date, then you're sitting there by yourself. What do? Cell phone. Now let me give you 15 menu options and each one has 10 sub options. How do you feel about that? And then you go back to work and you sit in front of your computer again, then you drive home, same thing. Then you come home and lean back on your couch and you want no options, just TV. Big screen. Please don't give me any options. And then you go to bed and you check your cell phone again. My point is, same person, one and the same individual, it's you. And you have to seamlessly migrate audiences from platform to platform to platform and entertain people for 18 hours a day, not for 3. That's the job of a media company today. But the story is that each of the situations that you're in has a very different user experience, but the user is the same. And so if you think about mobile, what is different about mobile? Is it a small PC? Well, no, it's not. Is it a small television set? No, it's not. What is it? Well, it's a new medium. It has location, it has social, it has context. It's completely different. It has a small screen. And by the way, that's not just a hurdle, that's an opportunity as well. So in other words, when you think as an entrepreneur, what can you do today that you could never do before? And that's where you need to come from a consumer perspective. From a consumer perspective, what is the natural use case? Why do you think we're in mobile meets retail? Because there are things you have never been able to do when you're out shopping until today. That's where the opportunity is. And I think those people who think mobile is a small PC or a small TV are missing out on about 80 to 90% of the opportunity. To me, it's like putting the New York Times on television. What an interesting channel to watch, isn't it? So who would have thought about when TV came, well, why don't we just have a newspaper channel? It's a new medium. So we got to use it and make use of everything in there. By the way, it's also one of the most social media ever invented, because it's probably the only medium you ever bought only to be social. And it has your entire social graph built in. It's called cell phone book. So everything is already there. Now you got to play with it. That's the challenge. And that's where the next big opportunity is. Think of mobile as an ID card, for example. You walk into your house and the TV should automatically pop up and say, you know, hi Doug, how was your day? Here's your TV shows that I recommend for today. So it's because it's your ID card. You don't hand your cell phone to anybody else. So think about all the functionalities that have never been tapped into.
I have one other thing to add. In foreign markets, like if you're looking out overseas and you want to look for an opportunity, I think the next big wave there is going to be for a very low-priced smartphone. So right now in the foreign markets, you know, Nokia dominates.
Right.
Their phones are pretty primitive. But I'll tell you, Nokia is looking for a way to beat Apple. and I bet that they're going to, I would keep my eye out for when Nokia comes out or one of the other manufacturers comes out with a very low-priced smartphone that just takes the third world by storm. And if it starts to go, you know, these phones start to sell like crazy in India and China and other places. Africa's a little harder, but definitely in India and China and countries like that, and Brazil, you will see a huge opportunity to get your apps out on that very low-priced smartphone. And if you're one of the first people to put your apps out there, you'll make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Great thought. Maybe one more question. Yeah, sure.
You talk a lot about location. The limit I see with it at the moment is, even with GPS and stuff, it's way too imprecise for actually what you want to do when you start talking about interaction with, say, with retail. Do you think there's going to be an opportunity when you, I mean, I think about, I want to be able to walk around Safeway and my phone to be able to tell me where my cookies are on the shelf. And that's going to be an interaction of that virtual reality type, and the interaction, you can take a photo and show it, plus potentially micro-location services within stores. Do you see that as being, that's kind of strikes me as an opportunity where you're using a mobile device for location at a much more micro level?
Yes.
Those
It's a very big opportunity.
People are solving those problems right now. So you'll see a big shift in the next year or so.
Great. Well, are we on time? Yeah. Well, thank you to the panel. So if we could. Is that it? Okay. Thank you.